time to do our ultimate rankings for week 6. If you enjoy the ultimate rankings, like I said, make sure you drop a like, make sure you subscribe as well. It really helps us out. Let's get in and start with running backs this week. And this S tier is going to be composed of 4 different individuals, 3 of which I'm sure you're not surprised about, but one I'm sure you're like, what the heck are you guys doing? These 4 guys are going to be Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, and Alvin Kamara. Kamara obviously has played in an S tier level all season, as well as Derrick Henry, who has been very good this season. Saquon, when he's been in as well, has been very good. Bijan has not. Everybody is very low on Bijan. So you're probably going to say, okay, why would you even rank Bijan here? What has he done to deserve this? Why are you guys having take lock? Absolutely not. Bijan has to have a good game this week or we will indefinitely move him down. The reason that he's still up here is because he is playing a Carolina Panthers defense this week that has given up the second most points to running backs in the league this year.
Yep.
They have been awful against running backs. If there were ever a week where Bijan would have a good week, it's this week. This is it for Bijan. Bijan, if you're watching, it's this week. It's now or never. So yes, Bijan has been a riskier start because he hasn't really been performing. Bijan has the best matchup he could possibly have right now. And so we're going to start Bijan everywhere this week. And he's going to be in the S tier with these other 3 guys.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, Swift and Roschon last week against Carolina combined for 35 fantasy points. 35. So top of the A tier, we're going to have Breece Hall. Yes or no, we are not freaking out about Breece Hall and his situation the last couple of weeks being very, very disappointing. We're going to continue to have him top 10 until, if this thing continues and we can talk about it further. But I personally am not really worried about Breece's usage or, him just not being efficient. These last 2 games where he was disappointing were just not built for him or running the ball when Aaron Rodgers is throwing it 54 times, right? So Breece is going to be fine. Jahmyr Gibbs obviously splitting carries with David Montgomery, but that matchup for the Detroit Lions running backs is, I believe, the only matchup this week with 4 green lights. We're looking at the matchup, the offense. Vegas is expecting it to be a very high-scoring game against the Dallas Cowboys. And then, you're looking at the situation there in Detroit. It's one of the best situations possible for running backs there. Even though they're splitting carries, they're still dropping 20 apiece. So Walker looks great coming back healthy. Yeah, he had a little bit of a dud game, but he was able to salvage it with a touchdown still. He has a really high floor. Jordan Mason going to continue to be up here as well as long as CMC is out.
Yeah, let's move to the B tier now. And the first guy and the last guy in this tier are going to play each other this week. The Vegas line for this one set at 49.5 points. Projects to be a pretty high-scoring game. Josh Jacobs obviously has the better matchup, as the run defense for the Cardinals is not near as good as the run defense for the Packers. That's why Connor is going to be at the bottom of this tier. This is a pretty good matchup for Josh Jacobs. And like I said, this is projected to be a high-scoring game for both of these guys are going to make it into our lineups. 2 guys in here with a little bit tougher matchups this week. You've got Jonathan Taylor going up against the Titans, and then you have Joe Mixon going up against the New England Patriots. These are both set to be lower-scoring games, and so these guys normally, JT would have really high upside, and we're obviously ranking JT here, assuming he does play this week. So if he does play, this is where we would have him. Joe Mixon, again, coming back from injury. JT would be coming back from injury. We're going to be conservative with these guys as they come back. And then James Cook as well in this tier with not a super easy matchup against the Jets. But all of these guys are guys you're starting still on a weekly basis.
Yeah, Tony Pollard, I want to highlight in the C tier. You're like, oh my gosh, why do you have him as high as RB15 this week? He, had an 18-point game, which was great for him, and a super friendly matchup before the bye in week 4. You can't expect that to happen again when a lot of that production came from a last-second touchdown. Yes, I agree. He has a really friendly matchup against the Indianapolis Colts this coming week. This is the same defense that, number one, has so many injuries, I've lost count. 2, it's not an excuse, and their defense just straight up sucks, and they're going to make everyone on the opposing offense look really good. That includes Tony Pollard, and even Tyjae Spears, honestly, could be a sneaky good flex option this week as well. But with Pollard being the top option there, getting a majority of the carries, I think he's poised to have a 15-plus point week. And Chuba, we're going to keep ranking up here until he stops producing, until Jonathan Brooks starts eating into his workload. He's got a neutral matchup against Atlanta this week. Again, expect probably a solid floor of like 12 points just with the usage. DeAndre Swift has earned his top 20 status again. So he's had 2 really solid weeks as another great matchup against the Jaguars, where Trey Sermon managed to be productive against that defense. DeAndre Swift is a bit more versatile and a lot more talented in what is an offense that's on the up, honestly, with Caleb Williams looking a lot better, DJ Moore popping off, DeAndre Swift reaping the benefits there as well. So nice little tier here. ETN going to be at the bottom. He's on a downward spiral because of Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, and this next tier here is going to be your lower end running back ones. You got Ramondre Stevenson this year. You guys like Najee Harris and J.K. Dobbins. A lot of these guys have tougher matchup this week, but we want to point out Rachaad White, who plays the Saints. The Saints have been really good against the run this year for fantasy purposes. Also want to point out Rico Dowdle, who's going against the Lions, and Lions' run defense has also been very good, and they've not allowed a lot of fantasy points. Those guys have tough matchups. A lot of these games, including Ramondre's game, Najee's game, J.K. Dobbins' game, are projected to be lower scoring. We also have Chase Brown in this tier. Chase Brown has just been outproducing Zach Moss, and so we're going to move him a tier above Zach Moss this week until something changes there, right? And then again, Rico Dowdle has been performing better. You saw him have a pretty good game against a tough Steelers defense the other night. But again, it is another tough matchup for Rico, and so we'll be a little bit conservative with him. And we are obviously aware that his ceiling is a little bit capped. So again, some lower end running back one options here to start.
Yeah, the F tier here, I want to look at Tyron Tracy because we are expecting, we're ranking Tyron Tracy this week, assuming that Singletary will be out another week. He was doubtful heading into week 5, which means he's probably going to be highly questionable for week 6 as well. Obviously, you're going to move Tracy down even more if Singletary starts. Even if Tyron Tracy is the top option, he's playing against the Cincinnati Bugles. And yeah, he had a lot of yardage, looked really nice. But he's got to get more usage in the red zone. And Malik Neighbors is coming back as well. So you're probably going to look at overall less usage for the running backs there, even if Tracy is the top option. Zach Moss, who Avery mentioned earlier, Chase Brown's just been straight up out producing him. Not to mention you now have the ankle injury that you have to worry about, who they did come out with a report today saying that it was a bit more of a scare, not super serious long term. He's going to be questionable, though. You're going to want to monitor that this week. And Tank Bigsby, we mentioned Travis Etienne. Etienne's still going to be ranked ahead of Tank Bigsby because I think his floor is a lot higher than Bigsby's. Bigsby's going to be a lot more dependent on big play ability, big play touchdowns, breaking one, from the 50-yard line into the end zone. But he is on the up in our rankings right here at running back 28. He could see himself jump a tier or two if he continues this solid production. He's just got to do it against better defenses than the Colts.
All right, in the G tier here, this is going to be a little bit ugly, but we'll put Trey Sermon at the top of this tier. This is kind of the middle ground between if he plays and if he doesn't. If Jonathan Taylor doesn't play, you probably have Trey Sermon as a fringe top 24 back. If Jonathan Taylor does play, Trey Sermon is irrelevant. So kind of make your own decision on that based on what the injury report says this week. Javonte Williams down here as well. Javonte actually had a pretty good game last week. The thing is, we don't necessarily believe in Javonte long term. And the Vegas line for this one is set at 36 points this week. And the Los Angeles Chargers run defense has been really good this year. Really good. So all of that points to Javonte really not doing a lot this week. Bucky Irving is behind him. Bucky didn't outproduce Rachaad White for once, which is, hats off to Rachaad White for actually doing something. But Bucky does continue to, he still continues to be a threat, in my opinion, to kind of take the majority of that work if he gets to that point. Justice Hill has some games where he does something, has some games where he doesn't, does play the Commanders this week, and it projects to be a high-scoring game, so he's going to be in this tier. Cam Akers, again, this is, kind of if Joe Mixon plays, and if he doesn't, you're going to have to make that distinction yourself as the injury report comes out. And then Tajay. I think Tajay actually is somebody that you consider flexing this week against the Indianapolis Colts. I think he's a fairly good start because the Colts are so bad, and because Tajay still continues to get some work in that offense, he can still be a high-upside receiving back. And so the matchup alone will at least get me considering to start Tajay Spears this week.
Yeah, and then the H tier, the only guy I want to talk about here that is very intriguing for the rest of the season is Roschon Johnson. Eyes on him. He's getting more and more goal line carries and opportunities in the red zone since Khalil Herbert is out, and Travis Homer, I think, is out for the season as well. So he's really, gone into that running back room as the second option and taken advantage of the opportunity he's been given. Obviously, 15 points alongside Swift's 20 against the Carolina Panthers defense last week. Again, he's got a nice matchup against Jacksonville this week. If he's able to get more opportunity in the red zone, he will also move up our rankings as well.
All right, let's pivot over to the wide receiver rankings for this week. And in this S tier, we're going to have our core 4 minus 1 because Justin Jefferson's not playing this week. But we're going to have CeeDee Lamb in this tier, Jamar Chase. We're going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who returns from his bye week this week. And then we're going to have Malik Neighbors. Like I said, we expect Malik Neighbors to come back this week. That's at least what we're projecting as we're recording this video and putting him in this tier. All of these guys have pretty neutral matchups this week, and none of them have any red lights on our tool. And all of these Vegas lines are 48.5 or higher. These are guys that you're starting every week, and they're the best wide receivers in fantasy anyway, but there's none of them even have a bad matchup this week, and so they're all going to be here, and we're going to feel obviously just as comfortable starting them as we normally are.
Yeah, and in the A tier, AJ Brown coming back healthy, playing the Cleveland Browns. It's not the friendliest matchup ever, but as long as Deshaun Watson is incompetent of running an offense, a pro offense, that offense in Philadelphia is going to be clicking on all cylinders, I believe, and they're just going to have so much opportunity to be productive. AJ Brown going to come back. I think he's going to be totally fine. It'll be fun for all of you AJ Brown owners for him to, come back after being out for multiple weeks. Drake London against the Panthers, had a nice 33-point game. Let's head that up with another 20+ point game. Honestly, that's what I'm expecting in one of the best matchups, friendliest fantasy matchups for any team in the Atlanta Falcons against the Panthers. And then Debo, you can tell that we are not fazed by Debo's disappointing production the last couple of weeks. We expect him to bounce back against Seattle this week, who really struggled against the Giants offense in week 5. That's something that we're going to want to monitor for future weeks. We may have to adjust how we are approaching teams matched up against the Seahawks defense. It might even be kind of friendly for guys like Debo. The Seahawks got to figure some things out because it was pretty ugly without Malik Neighbors and the Giants still putting up a clinic last week. So
all right, let's move to the next tier here. And this is going to be a big tier. We're going to start with DK. Obviously, DK has been trending a little bit more down recently. We're still big believers in DK. That offense is still much better than it was last year. And DK continues to get a high enough target volume to where even if he is a big play receiver, he's going to be scoring points for your fantasy team. So we'll put him here. DJ Moore, we're going to bump way up this week. DJ Moore, fresh off of a game where he just scored 20+ points. But he's playing the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, and the Jaguars have given up the most points to wide receivers in the NFL this season from a fantasy perspective. And so he is an absolute smash, must start. You will not leave him out of your lineups no matter what. Jaden Reed playing the Cardinals, 49.5 is the Vegas line for that one. It's going to be high scoring. Jaden Reed continues to be at least somewhat productive with a floor of about 10 to 12 points minimum when Jordan Love does play. And so Jaden Reed is going to be somebody that until he doesn't produce, until he doesn't get targets, we're going to put up here. Stephon Diggs, we're going to move up, and he's going to be pretty high in our rankings at 12 because you don't expect to have Nico Collins there this week. It makes Diggs the wide receiver 1. This is a tougher matchup, though. Diggs would be higher than this if they weren't playing the Patriots. So the Vegas line for this one is set at 37.5 points. I mean, the Patriots just kill these Vegas lines. And so whether I honestly would take the over there because I think the Texans alone can, I think they could take care of business against the Patriots, but you are going to have Christian Gonzalez on Stephon Diggs. So you do need to keep that in mind. I still don't think he's somebody you can leave out of your lineup this week regardless. Mike Evans playing the Saints. The Saints have been decent against wide receiver this year. Vegas line for this one set at 45.5. And so you're always just starting Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin is 2 spots below him because these guys are always back to back. One of them could produce. The other one could produce. They both could produce. They all have Chris Godwin has a high floor. Mike Evans has a high ceiling. You start both of them, right? I think you're rolling with that every week. Hey, Zay Flowers actually had a pretty good week last week, and he has another good matchup this week against the Commanders. Commanders have actually given up the 4th most points to fantasy wide receivers this year. And so Zay, honestly, it was the yards, it was the targets last week, it was everything. And obviously the fantasy points followed. It was really encouraging for Zay Flowers, and I think he's somebody that you can plug into your lineup and feel really good about it this week. And then Garrett Wilson. And obviously you're like, Garrett Wilson had 22 targets last week. What are you doing ranking him this low? It is a very tough matchup this week for Garrett Wilson playing the Buffalo Bills. The Vegas line for that one's only 41.5. And so the Vegas is bad. The matchup is bad. The Bills have not given up a ton of points to fantasy wide receivers this year. Garrett Wilson is somebody that we would be ranking higher. He is somebody that we ranked higher even when he was going through his slump. Again, it's more about this week specifically. It's a tough matchup, and we're going to have to see whether or not the target competition and the target share carries over for Garrett Wilson and what we see him do this week against the Bills.
Yeah, and the C tier is going to be a little tier here. We've got Terry, T, and Ayuk, just 3 guys. Terry, again, is going to be very big play dependent, but he's really reaped the benefits of Jaden Daniels just taking off in the last month. And, he only had 13 points in a matchup where Washington was really just all over Cleveland's all day. He only had 4 receptions, but had 112 yards. Again, big play dependent, going to need a touchdown or a big play to, get like 15 plus. But I think at this point, Jaden Daniels looks so good. You can kind of count on that. And we're comfortable having him here in the C tier. T Higgins is just reaping the benefits of Cincinnati finally figuring out how to play football. This is, classic Cincinnati. Every single year they start and they look horrible for the first month of the season. They figure things out every single year, and then they all lose their minds in the second month of the season. For the rest of the year, they're all going to be super productive. Higgins is going to continue to look great. And then we got Brandon Ayuk here. I will note that Avery and I think, have Brandon Ayuk like almost 10 spots apart in our rankings here. So we found the middle ground here in this C tier, which I think is reasonable because we are expecting Deebo Samuel to be the more productive wide receiver there in a matchup against Seattle. He has been in the past. Ayuk probably going to come down to earth a little bit compared to what he did last week when he was just doing whatever he wanted, since everyone forgot that Brandon Ayuk existed because he didn't exist for the first month of the season. So you're probably going to see some boom bust games with Ayuk. He has a pretty solid matchup again this week against Seattle. He could easily go off and be higher and more productive than this. But again, expect Debo to be the more productive guy.
Amari Cooper starting the D's tier with the Eagles, and Cooper obviously is in quarterback freaking purgatory right now, and that's bad for him. Yeah. But you're still going to continue to start him. He's still getting the targets, as is Deontay Johnson. He came back down to earth this week. It is a good matchup against the Falcons. The Falcons are not bad against wide receiver, but they're not great against wide receiver, and it projects to be a fairly high-scoring game. Devonta Smith comes back. Pretty tough matchup against the Browns, so we'll rank him conservatively. Brian Thomas is somebody that I plan to rank a lot higher than this moving forward. But the Bears defense has been pretty darn good this year. Not only good all around, but good against wide receiver in particular. And so I'm going to be conservative with Brian Thomas this week because I do think that they are going to be able to shut him down. And they have not allowed a lot of fantasy points to fantasy wide receivers this year. So, and then JSN against the 49ers. JSN is still pretty hit and miss. He had a touchdown last game. He had 13 points, same as he'd had the game before that. And so, like, he's still producing, but like you still don't see the ceiling yet for JSN on a consistent basis. And so not really sure where to rank him, but I think this is a pretty conservative range as to where we think he might fall this week in the rankings.
Yeah, and then at the top of the F tier, we're going to have JMO and George Pickens. JMO, any given week can score 15 points. Any given week can score less than 5. It just depends on if he can pull away and get a touchdown, a big play. George Pickens, I can't even talk about because he's awful. Tank Dell might move up these rankings depending on how long Nico Collins is out. His injury moved from day to day to now week to week. Who knew? Who could have thought that would happen with a hamstring injury? But Calvin Ridley, I think, is the most important guy that I want to highlight in this tier. He is playing the Indianapolis Colts secondary. We have told you every single week to start any relevant wide receiver against the Colts. It has paid off every single week. Calvin Ridley is going to be a fringe flex option for a lot of you guys out there. Start him. Don't even ask a question. Calvin Ridley, and if you have DeAndre Hopkins, you're considering flexing him as well. I think both of them are poised to have pretty solid weeks.
All right, at the top of this next year, we're going to have Michael Pittman and Jacoby Myers. And I wanted to talk about this because Nathan and I, we essentially have these guys flip-flopped. I'm assuming that Anthony Richardson is playing this week. And when he does, I think Michael Pittman is borderline flexible at best. And with Jacoby Myers, I'm assuming that there's not going to be Devontae Adams this week. And so I'm ranking him higher. So Nathan, I want your thoughts on those guys because we essentially have them 10 spots apart completely. Like we have
10 spots apart. Seriously?
Yeah, you have Pittman 9 spots higher than I do, and I have Jacoby 9 spots higher than you.
I pulled Pittman down a lot too. I thought his projection this week was awful. Like I pulled him down significantly because I'm assuming that AR isn't going to, or that I'm assuming that AR is going to start this week as well.
I guess I just pulled him down further than you.
I think I'm betting on Bowers probably just being more productive this week. Like, and their quarterback situation is awful, so I'm not going to like put him up into wide receiver 2 territory, but I still think he'll be fine. Like I moved him up quite a bit. So
you want to talk about Mooney because you have him ranked as like a high-end wide receiver 3 this week.
Yeah, 30 points will do that. When Drake London dropped 33 too, and Kyle Pitts dropped like 12 plus. So, I mean, Mooney even had some solid weeks before that as well. Obviously, he's not going to, drop 30 every single week, but his target volume has been impressive. Last 4 weeks, 7, 8, 6, and 16, right? He's not going to get 16, but 7, 8, 6. I mean, that's enough for him to drop 17, 14, 8, and 31 points. So I think that's definitely viable for a high-end wide receiver 3 option this week.
Yeah, and Mooney so far on the season is the wide receiver 15, so that's worth noting as well.
Right.
So we have him here, D-Hop, Rashid, Shaheed, and Cortland Sutton. Again, D-Hop is playing the Colts this week. That alone is enough reason to bump him up here. You obviously saw Calvin Ridley. I had Calvin Ridley and D-Hop ranked back-to-back. I think D-Hop has been outproducing Calvin Ridley recently. I think, Nathan, you probably moved Calvin Ridley much higher than I did, and so it kind of separated these guys out. Rashid Shaheed, it has a pretty good matchup this week, actually, against the Bucs. The Bucs have allowed a lot of points to fantasy wide receivers. And then Cortland Sutton, and Cortland Sutton's going against the Chargers. And, it's not a great matchup. The Chargers' defense is pretty good. Their secondary is pretty good. And the line for this one's like 36 points. So, again, we're not expecting a ton out of these guys, but will be interesting. These guys are borderline flexes this week.
Yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson is a border flex option as well. Not as exciting, obviously, without Malik Neighbors, but now that Malik Neighbors is back in, you know that Wan'Dale's ceiling is going to be capped, though he is going to get a decent amount of target volume. It kind of opens up the field a little bit for him while everyone's so focused on Malik Neighbors. But again, he will be in this H tier. Keenan Allen continues to move down rankings. Rome Odunze, we consistently have him in the same tier back to back. It's anyone's guess who's going to be more productive. DJ Moore is going to be the top guy there probably every single week. And then Josh Downs, we are not buying the Josh Downs hype as much as we'd love to as Colts fans. And as much as we know how good Josh Downs is as a true wide receiver, he cannot produce and have a super high ceiling when Anthony Richardson is throwing the ball, because Anthony Richardson cannot throw the ball to anyone accurately and consistently. Kind of sucks. So that's a bummer. But the last guy that we're going to have here at the tail end of this tier is Jalen Tolbert. He'll probably just be in this range every single week while Brandon Cooks is out, because he is the second guy, the next man up behind CeeDee Lamb. But his ceiling obviously is going to be capped as well. That offense is just run through CeeDee Lamb entirely, and anyone's guess who's going to be the productive guy of Ferguson, Tolbert, Dowdle every single week.
All right, let's jump over to tight ends now. We'll finish our tight end rankings here. The S tier are going to be the three guys every week that you're actually feeling good about starting. It's going to be McBride, it's going to be Kelsey, it's going to be Bowers. These guys are locked in starters. Three of the only tight ends in the league that have consistently been and even Kelsey was not great to start the season. So tight end is a crap show right now, but Bowers is the tight end one right now, which is awesome because I have Bowers in the flock league and Nathan gave him to me. And McBride continues to be pretty consistent, honestly. He's one of the few consistent tight ends left. Kittle, obviously, is Kittle, and he's still productive as well. So these three guys are feeling good about starting every week. And then after this, it's a complete crap show. So.
Yeah, total crap show. In the B tier, you've got Laporta, Pitts, Ferguson, Kincaid, and Kraft. Kraft has made his way to the B tier because he's had some solid weeks. He seems to be really taking over the top job over Luke Musgrave, right, who is the original third-round pick. Kraft going in the same class, 6 rounds, and now they're both in their second year. Musgrave has been injured. Kraft has taken advantage and has really seemed to do well with Jordan Love there, and the other receiver has been able to get his own and be productive. Had a 2-touchdown week in week 5. Want to see him to be able to capitalize on more opportunity in a matchup against the Arizona Cardinals this week. So another friendly one for him. And then I'm going to touch on the C tier here as well, because there's a couple guys. Evan Ingram, assuming he's going to come back healthy from the hamstring, and then Dallas Goedert, who has a tough matchup against Cleveland. He would generally be in the B tier because he's been one of the most productive tight ends this season, which is not saying much, but he's AJ Brown and Devonta Smith are also coming back healthy, so his ceiling is going to be severely capped compared to when one or both of them were out the last few weeks. And then the D tier, Isaiah Likely will be back here. He had a 2-touchdown week in a very highly productive game. Mark Andrews got some usage. It didn't matter. You're not feeling comfortable starting Likely or Andrews. You've got Ertz in this range as well. Tyler Conklin, Dalton Schultz, all, pass heavy offenses where they can get a decent amount of volume, maybe put up 8 to 10 points on good weeks if you have to flex them or put them in there when your top option is on a bye. So
all right, and let's finish up here with our quarterback rankings. We'll start in the S tier. We have Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson at the top of these rankings because they play each other in a matchup where the line is at 52.5. Both these guys have rushing upside. It should be a shootout. Both these guys are absolute must-starts, the two best starts this week in fantasy football for quarterbacks. And you got Kyler Murray in this tier as well with the rushing upside. Continues to show that. You saw the big run last week. And then let's jump down to the A tier here as well. We got Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts. Joe Burrow actually had a really good game last week. Jalen Hurts, obviously, had the bye week, but comes back, still has that rushing upside. Joe Burrow this week does have a pretty good matchup against the Giants. Projected to be a high-scoring game, and obviously it's a pretty good matchup for that offense as well, so you expect Joe Burrow to be fairly productive there. Jordan Love has a really good matchup. He's got the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals have given him a ton of points to quarterbacks this season. And so Love between that and 49.5 point Vegas line. We really like his matchup this week. Josh Allen playing the Jets. It will be in this year as well. And Josh Allen is lower than he normally is because Josh Allen has been pretty hit or miss this season, actually. Right? I mean, I don't think anybody who has Josh Allen or drafted Josh Allen would argue this. Josh Allen has not always been the Josh Allen that we know and we're used to. When you're looking at his game log the last couple games, 14, 7 points after his 30-point game, but then 9 points in week 2. And Houston and Baltimore were fairly good matchups for him, honestly, from a quarterback standpoint. Now he goes to play the Jets defense. And so he's still quarterback one. You're still starting Josh Allen because you drafted him to start him. But it's a tough matchup against the Jets. The Jets have not given up a lot of points to quarterbacks this year. So we'll keep an eye out for Josh Allen this week.
Yeah, and then the beats here, we're going to have an extensive one here. Just a lot of pass-happy guys. You've got guys like Stroud, Baker, Dak, Cousins, Goff, Caleb Williams, who's coming off a nice game against Carolina. You've got Purdy, who's so consistent every single week, right? He's got a cap ceiling, but he is very consistent. You're feeling comfortable starting him every week. Every single one of these guys, Kirk Cousins, honestly, you can make an argument to move higher because they are playing Carolina. He could go absolutely bananas this week. Just depends on how much production comes on the ground with Bijan Robinson versus in the air with Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, etc. But I think every single one of these guys in this range, again, you're expecting them to have high passing volume, and they're going to get most of their production from there. Cap ceiling, so they're not going to be in the higher tiers super often unless they have crazy good matchups.
Little baby tier here with Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields, both guys with rushing upside that unfortunately
can't throw a ball.
That you can't really throw. And I know you've got somebody already typing in the comments. What are you talking about? Justin Fields can throw the ball. He's been amazing this season. Okay, whatever. You know what I'm saying. Justin Fields' floor is pretty low. But here's the thing. Richardson's playing the Titans. Fields playing the Raiders. The line for Fields' game is 36.5 points. I really wouldn't expect a lot out of either of these guys this season. And then let's go to the D tier here. We got Carr, we got Jones, we got Geno, we got Levis, we got Lawrence, Rodgers, and Herbert, and all of these guys had fairly good matchups. Daniel Jones playing the Bengals in a game of that. Again, the total points set at 49. It could be a high-scoring game, and Daniel Jones hasn't been bad this year. And the rest of these are kind of, washed. And here's our full set of quarterback rankings. So you can take a look at these if you're in deeper leagues or if you're in Superflex leagues, because most of us are probably going to only use the top 15 of this rankings. But there you go. Our ultimate rankings for this week. Like I said, if you enjoy this format and want us to keep doing ultimate rankings, the best way that you show us that we should keep doing it is dropping a like, and make sure you are subscribed as well. We get a lot of subscribers from these videos. That's why we've kept doing them. And so if you enjoy the content, you enjoy the quality, you enjoy what we're putting out, make sure you subscribe and join the club. Make sure you go to flockfantasy.com/domain and use code domain to unlock free trade calculator, free rankings, and a ton more. But use code domain when you sign up, and our link is going to be in the description in the comments section. So appreciate you guys so much. Have a good one, and we'll see you later.